Good rising, brethren. This is Big Judah coming to you guys from California. Before I begin, give all praise to the Most High, Yahweh. Acknowledgement to the earthly mother. Who is wisdom? Who is the Holy Spirit? Acknowledge Yahweh Shai. I pray the Most High blesses this lesson this evening, gives more knowledge and understanding of the events of the past, in order to understand events that are currently happening on the earth, so we get a much better understanding of the things that are soon to come on the earth. Brethren, we're going to get into the Bible that I just received. And don't worry, we're going to get into those other books as well. We're going to get into more of the historical information that has been hidden. And it's actually hidden in some of these old Bibles as well. I'm going to get right into it real quick. Coming here from this Bible here. Okay. And look at the bottom. When it's talking about the Church of England, it says, it is quite probable that the gospel, okay, as preached in Britain by the apostle Paul. Let me get that again. It is quite probable that the gospel was preached in Britain by the apostle St. Paul. Now remember, in the newer Bibles, they hid this fact. They got rid of Acts 29. But here in this Bible in the late 1800s, it's actually telling you that Paul, more than likely, preached in Britain. Now, see, they seem to really be wanting to hide the fact that, especially the apostle that they all rely on so much, that they always use to try to throw themselves into the mix, that he was the apostle that went into Britain. You would have thought that they would have brought that up in the church, right? You would have thought they would have brought that up in the church. You know, hey, they always want to make it sound like he went everywhere. Why is it so important for them to hide the fact that he went to Britain? It says Eusebius, when speaking of the labors of the apostles in distant countries, adds that some passed over the ocean into those islands called the British Islands. So see, now we're talking about, these guys going to Britain, passing over the waters. Now, if you're stuck with only the 80 books that the church gave you, you wouldn't have even known that. That's why you can't trust the other nations and trust the fact that they would have given you all the books. They're trying to hide the fact that Paul found his brethren in Britain and Ireland. The druids were Hebrews, as well as many other people, I'm sure. But see, now when you put that together with the video a couple of videos ago, talking about how the Most High kept the other nations from any knowledge of Britain or Ireland, it just shows you that whatever was there had nothing to do with the Gentiles. You talk about the Phoenicians beaching their ships and destroying them and destroying their cargo so that others would not be able to follow them. I said, it just shows you what's going on right here. So these churches, I mean, these so-called, Christians and these people right here, the Gentiles, are trying to really downplay anything that has to do with Britain, Ireland, and Paul, and any of the other apostles. Why do you think that is? Let's continue. So again, Eusebius, when speaking of the labors of the apostles in distant countries, adds that some passed over the oceans into the islands called the British Islands. Tertullian in AD 190 says there are places in Britain inaccessible to Roman arms, which were subdued to Christ. From these and other authorities, it is evident that the gospel was preached, okay, in, just look at the top there, Britain at a very early day, and that the church was fully organized there at an early period. It is a fact of history, not to be disputed, that the British bishops were present at the Council of Aries in 314, at Nietzsche in 325, and at Sardica 347. These facts prove that the early establishment of the British Church, now the Church of England, for 5 centuries, she maintained her independence of the Church of Rome, down to the Saxon invasion. Now, see, they're sitting here trying to write themselves into our history. There was no Church of England at that time. Remember now, in the British Islands, the Gentiles were not there. They were not allowed to go there. Talks about Rome being one of the first countries to actually get in there. And when they did get there, they didn't know anything about it. But see, these people are trying to make it sound like that was the Church of England that was already established there. And we know that it wasn't. Remember, we also read that other book from the other book in a few videos ago that talked about Rome actually just going in and destroying the churches that were there and putting their churches on top of that. But trust me, it was no Church of England. Those were the Hebrews. Those were the ones that had churches on the ley lines. And the Romans came in and they wanted their piece of the pie. They wanted their chance to get at the ley lines and get that power. But these guys want to say that, well, their church was already established before the Roman church. Well, of course. The other nations didn't have anything. But see, they try to slide, try to be all slick with it and get themselves and put themselves in there and make it seem as if it was the Anglo-Saxon or the so-called Indo-European white people's churches that were there before the Romans got there. And we know that that's not true. That's why you got to really read, and then when you know who was there first, and you understand that the other Indo-Europeans were not allowed to go into those lands, then that means that the church that was there had nothing to do with the Indo-Europeans. And that's why we're not just going to read over and gloss over it and that's it. That's why this is very, very important information right here. And you talk about all these different councils, and like I said, in the other books, it makes it seem as if those councils weren't even really true. Remember? There's no paperwork that actually proved that those councils actually happened. So this could have happened a lot more recently, but the whole point is that the whole church was established before the Romans even got there. And the churches that were established were the Most High's chosen people's churches. And this was all part of the takedown of our people because we messed up. And then the Most High allowed the Gentiles to come in and take over our lands. So again, let's read that little part again. These facts prove the early establishment of the British Church, now the Church of England. See, it was an early British church. Now it's the Church of England. See that? Because they're trying to be slick with it. It wasn't British like it was the other nations. It was our people that set up these churches, that set up these places of worship, that set up these places of worship on the ley lines. That's why when you look at the ley line books that we've been getting into, they're just all set up exactly the same way we had our society set up. All they did was come in, take down our places of worship, and build theirs right on top. So right there it says, for 5 centuries, she maintained her independence of the Church of Rome, down to the Saxon invaders. We were independent way longer than just 5 centuries before. We were there for thousands and thousands of years. And then when they got there, they got the annals of the 4 masters, and all they did was anglicize it into their own books. So that's why it's very important for us to look at what's going on in Britain and Ireland, because it happened there first, and that was their jumping off station to coming to the New World. Once they got there, they found out about, they knew about the tin, TIN, but then, they got a hold of the natural resource. And then all of a sudden, their navy was unstoppable. When the English actually finally get a hold of everything. Okay, let's continue. In the year 596, Rome sent over Augustine with a hand. Hold on here. With a band of missionaries to Britain. And there he found the old British church regularly organized and established. Like I said, the old British church was going to be the Most High's chosen people's church. But see, they got to sit there and try to, change it up, change who was there, like they always do. Try to interject themselves like they've been there the whole time. Okay, so again, the British church regularly organized and established. Hence, it is evident that the Church of England does not derive her origin from the Church of Rome, but was established 5 centuries before Rome sent her missionaries there. The whole point there is that the people that were there before the Romans showed up had already established their church. They get you to think, like when they say the Church of England, you get you thinking of white Indo-Europeans. And we know that those were not the ones that set up the churches on the ley lines. Those were our people, not theirs. And that goes back to the Black Celts book and who was there tens of thousands of years ago. And it wasn't them. So you gotta make sure we really get that part right there. Hence, it is evident that the Church of England does not derive her origin from the Church of Rome, but was established 5 centuries before Rome sent her missionaries there. So again, there's only 2 churches. Remember, Priests of Mahan and the Most High's Church. Priests of Mahan reestablished their whole religion with Catholicism, universalism. So if you're finding other churches that have nothing to do with them, then those are the churches of the Most High. Okay. It says, during the invasion of the barbarians, she suffered severely. And even in the Dark Ages, when the power of the Pope was generally recognized in Christendom, there were mainly spirits in the Church of England who did not hesitate to speak out boldly against the usurpations of Rome, regardless of consequences. And so these other churches are all the same. They all work for the priests of Mahan. They all work for the devil, the evil spirits. So ones that would actually speak boldly against Rome would be the Most High's churches, the Most High's chosen people. Just like you read in the scriptures. You got the Pharisees and you got going against the Most High's chosen people. The Most High's chosen people were a small group of people. You got the prophets going out there against hundreds of other priests from the other religions. And they would speak boldly to them because we know that we have the Most High's power behind us. So you sit here and you listen about people speaking boldly against the Catholic Church. That would be the Most High's chosen people. The other ones are pretty much subjugated to the Catholic Church. So again, the Church of England, who did not hesitate to speak out boldly against the usurpations of Rome, regardless of consequence. It says, but at last, in common with the whole Church of God, but at last, in come against the usurpation of Rome, regardless of consequences, but at last, in common with the whole Church of God, she was forced to submit to the authority of Rome. That's it. All of these churches are going to be forced to submit to the power of Rome. It says, and thus she continued down to the Reformation of the 16th century. It was then that she threw off the yoke of Rome. Okay, so we're going to stop right there because they're going to make it seem as if, the people that the Protestants have thrown off the yoke of Rome, and they haven't. They're in league with Rome. They teach almost the exact same doctrine with a couple little changes here and there. But this is, like I said, this is coming out of the Bible, talking about, the other apostles going to Britain. We know in Acts 29, he talks about Paul going to Britain and going to Ireland and talking with the druids and talking about how they were related. Now you got a book right here that talks about, this church that was already pre-established before Rome got there. And it was not the Church of England, but they always try to make it, they're always trying to use that. Just like they use the Irish and the Celts. They know that that's us, but they try to throw someone else in there so that we can't make those connections. Not until now. Now we have the Holy Spirit, and now we're making those connections. So the Most High is making those connections, bringing those puzzle pieces together, so that as he gives us more knowledge and understanding, we know how to read between the lines. So this is one of the bad things that they've done. They made it seem as if the white people, Indo-Europeans, were everybody. The Indo-Europeans were the Greeks. The Indo-Europeans are the British. The Indo-Europeans are the Irish. Indo-Europeans, actually are Egyptians. They're the South Africans. They're Australian. Now they're crying because this is their country. So they're the real Americans. So you can't be all things. Especially now that we realize that the Most High kept you away from Britain because it was a holy land. It had great resources. 10, T-I-N, and how many uses it was for 10. So the Most High is bringing more knowledge and understanding, and we're going to keep bringing all that out. All praise is to the Most High, Yahweh. Acknowledgement to the earthly mother. Who is wisdom? Who is the Holy Spirit? Acknowledgement to Yahweh Shai. Shalom.